To help us further explore the various dimensions of risk management for small business that Drew has brought to our attention, we have again asked two more of our local businesses to assist us. Ned Davis is the founder and CEO of Maui Innovation Group. The mission of Maui Innovation Group is to create inventions that are environmentally friendly and make our community healthier. Ned is also chair of the board of directors of Maui Economic Development Board, where he led a process on risk management for MEDB. Saedene Ota is the owner of two small businesses in Wailuku Town. Say Design, founded in 1998, okay, and an award-winning branding and design, which is an award-winning branding and design firm here on Maui and Oahu. And she also founded in 2007 Maui Thing, which sells clothing and accessories for the whole family and is described as a movement, a brand that portrays the essence of life and living on the Valley Isle. So let's give this panel and Drew Nagai, our moderator, a big hand.
So let me ask you folks, what, as the small business owners, what does keep you up at night?
Okay, keeps me up at night. Game of Thrones.
What is that?
It's a show. Just
Okay.
kidding. Well, as a small business owner, a really small business owner, and in the service industry, it's a multitude of things. It's keeping my clients happy, making sure I'm getting my estimates out of time. It's, payroll. It's for small business, you have to wear a lot of hats. Mm-hmm. So, what I've learned over time is that though you have to wear a lot of hats, you also have to trust other professionals to help you through the process. Whether it's your accountant, making sure you have insurance, asking colleagues, because you can't do it all yourself. You'd like to think that you can and you want to save a lot of money, but it's really, really worth it to kind of invest that time and money into other professionals.
You kind of get what you pay for sometimes,
exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
And I get it, as a small business owner, you're the boss. You have to manage everything. You got to make everything work, but you're also the janitor sometimes. So I get it. Right? Yeah. Thank you. What about you then?
Okay. So I've been in line management for 20 years now, big businesses too, and I guess that's going to color my response. But certainly, my biggest concern is if there's a fatality, and that's happened before. I've had enough people who've worked for me, and it was in a car. We're not sure if the heart attack got them first or the car
But just
crash
from the
got 'em
humanistic
first.
standpoint,
But yeah, just
right?
from the human side, that's obviously my biggest fear. Going back, it's kind of ironic that you ended with that triangle of the different risks. But the number of times I've been in the emergency room late at night with employees and all that, obviously injuries are the next, and that's happened much more often. And certainly we try everything we can to be safe. I think your point about the difference between unsafe conditions and unsafe acts is pretty true, though. There's some things that you just don't see coming, but a lot of times it's something that someone has done, and that ultimately leads to the accident. So those are the two, first and foremost risks, worst things that can happen in a business from my standpoint. Maybe the third, and this is more the small business finally I started answering with, right. Experience that goes way back. But from a small business standpoint, I always worry about, how much runway do we have? When can we start getting in, enough money, and does the money that we have right now last until that comes around? So.
Well, and that's just like payroll, right? Making payroll every 2 weeks and things like that.
Yeah. It's easier at the big companies where the accounting department takes care of all that.
Yeah.
But we are the accounting department.
You mentioned like keeping your customers happy. What kinds of things do you need to do in that regard, and what happens if something bad happens?
Yeah. I would say it's, common sense customer relationships, making sure you answer calls, making sure you're responsible. You said, Hawaii is very small, Maui's even smaller. Your reputation's at stake, and perception is, it's the reality of how you act and perform and how you are in the county, and that really, really goes a long way. One thing that I did learn when I first started my business, because everyone knows each other and I was just starting out, it's a lot of small jobs, so it was kind of like a handshake kind of deal where it's just, oh, I trust you, yeah, I'll pay you later, this kind of thing. You don't get paid, and so after losing a lot of money, I have to formalize this. So even if for the smallest job, even if it's a pro bono job, just to have some kind of formal contract to just lay everything out so that everything's on paper and that there's a transparency between you and your client. On the same note, though, you talk about like, when you work with vendors, how do you lessen the risk, like say if the vendor messes up. Relationships, again, are really, really important, where I've been able to build a circle of vendors that I trust, and if I make a mistake or if they make a mistake, we can kind of work it out. So, and it's not so hard-nosed, and so that really, really makes a difference in the survival of a small business here.
You think it's because you're in Maui, it's even more prevalent that the relationships are there?
I would say so, but I mean, it goes to Oahu as well, too, as far as my vendor relationships. It took some time to find out who were the people that we kind of had the same kind of moral compass when it came to business and what was meaningful for our clients. And once you find that partner, and I always call my vendors partners because we're working together for the betterment of our client's product.
Interesting. Yeah, because we've seen a lot of instances where the communication piece is really important with your vendors and suppliers, and that's really important. But then there's a $2 million loss and everything goes out the window, everybody's looking at the contract. So it's two sides of the story too as well, right? So you had mentioned it about, your most important thing that you thought about is like employee injuries, and to the point where they, there are fatalities or really bad injuries. What kinds of things did you do to help mitigate those kinds of things from happening?
Well, some things like the car accident that I mentioned, there's not very much that can be done. It's really, I think that's in one of those freak occurrence type categories.
Well, you're talking to a safety guy. There's no freak occurrence.
There's no freak occurrence. Okay. There are other times, and it's a little bit perhaps tongue-in-cheek, but yes, there's someone on a business trip and got hit by a taxi, and again, a big business, I was hauled in front of the safety review board, and sort of like going to court, and I get up in front to explain what happened, how the accident occurred, what the injuries were, all that, and they got to this question that you asked me, how am I going to prevent this in the future? I said, well, I'm not sending that guy on a business trip again.
Because he can't go now.
right. He can't go. Can't walk very far. So there's some things that I think are darn near unforeseeable, and you just have to live with it. I mean, obviously, no one wants that to happen. There are other aspects. You look at machines, for example. So we do R&D type work, as Frank mentioned when he introduced us, and we have to have machines to do that work. If we send a design for a prototype off to the mainland, and then it comes back in 3 or 4 days, and of course it doesn't work quite like what we thought it was going to do, and then we send it off. Well, that's not going to work out. We won't get anywhere. So we have machines. But you look at the machines. Obviously, we all wear safety glasses. We have hearing protection, have this and that. But you sort of keep an eye out. Is there a new type of guard? A lot of our gizmos that I'm trying to invent involve magnets. I have magnetic guards on the machines now. Wow. You can get them on and off the machine very quickly. Okay. So set up a piece, pop the magnetic guard on. Do whatever process you have to do, and the guard can come right back off, and you can get to it. And if you compare that to the bad old days where you're doing wing nuts and this screw and that screw and assembling things, right? It's a big advance. So a lot of times, even if the modern safety equipment's a little bit more expensive, it's well worth it because people will actually use it if it's convenient enough and seamless enough to use. So.
You know what we find too is even for males. the personal protective equipment, it needs to be stylish.
Yeah, I see.
And then people will use it. So, right?
Actually,
The
one
glasses
of my longtime technicians right hand, all that, she definitely has her favorite goggles. And she says some others, oh no, they're no good. They don't look good. Plus they slide down her nose. So.
Right. And that's the main thing, they look good, right?
Right, there you go.
Okay. Okay, so anything else that you guys want to say, or things that people should know about risk management, and what your approach is, or?
Well, I was saying this is perhaps a little bit of the big company had again, because maybe a small company doesn't have this sway with some of the suppliers who do. But I can remember, working with machine shops on the mainland, big shops, and you actually want the safety protocols to flow down to them too, because if that supplier goes bankrupt, it affects our business dramatically. So, in terms of relationships with suppliers, if you can find ones that are doing things in the right way, not necessarily just maybe the cheapest way, or if you can encourage them to do things in the right way, that's a big benefit to everyone. No one wants to have to go, midstream and replace a supplier on a complicated project.
Yeah. It's a win-win situation, right? Any- Okay, thank you. There you go. I'm sorry.
I guess for me, because I'm in the service industry, it's not like I'm having much delivery service or running equipment. The worst accident that happened probably in my office was a girl. She cut her finger with an X-Acto blade, and that was pretty traumatic. So she just doesn't do it anymore. So we just kind of eliminated
We call
that.
it avoidance.
Yeah, so avoided that risk.
Like my employee with the taxi.
Right. But for me, overall, when I was asked to do this, I said, I don't know if I'm like the right person to be up here, because I take a lot of risks in general as a small business person. So I think in the technical sense, you always have to be top of mind as far as what kind of risks or what level of risk you want to take. But as a small business person, as you're growing, and if you want to try new ideas, there are ways to kind of calculate and plan ahead so that there's not less burden and financially or legally. And I think when I started Maui thing, it was a great idea. We had all the tools to do it, but I didn't have a solid business plan in place. And that's probably looking back, I probably could have spent less if I had a plan in place, and kind of everything from marketing to build out to salaries, insurance, so on and so forth. I was kind of a little loosey-goosey about it. So as a small business owner, it's always good to really, really be meticulous about your planning, no matter how small your business is.
Some really good points. Yeah, thank you. Okay, so
I would say is absolutely right. To do a small business, there's risk involved. People who are totally risk adverse, it wouldn't work. To start a new project in a big business, there's risk involved. That's the way life goes. If you want to avoid risk, you have to do something that's been done before and everything's been proven out. I will say that once upon a time I was very interested in risk management. I worked on a nonprofit. I even wanted to be a risk manager for a little while back at Northrop Grumman. One of the things we look at is at the start of any new project or new business, there's going to be risk. It's nice if we can quantify it. There are unknown unknowns too. But what you want to see over time with traditional risk management is what they call a waterfall process, where your risk goes down over time. You don't want to save up all the risk for the last day and then surprise, it works or it doesn't work. That's probably a poor,
high risk, high return.
Right. Well, maybe, but if you don't know till the last day, there's a lot of investment that goes in. You'd rather see maybe the risk come down over time, and perhaps I've heard it phrased as toll gates, but stop points along the way. If you say, well, the risk just isn't coming out of this project, we've got a real problem going here. At least you can stop before all the money's invested. The other thing we have are like some of your earlier charts, and actually I saw it makes sense from an insurance standpoint, I never thought of it really this way. But you've got frequency. I have probability on mine, so probability and severity. But those quadrants, and sometimes we'll break it down, and instead of just four areas, we'll have 16 for across and four down, but and make a color in the
It's a little bit more complicated, right? Yeah. Well, and those are good points. And by your very nature, being entrepreneurs, you are risk takers, contractors, risk takers. But yeah, it's important to kind of take a step back sometimes and think about things. And having a good plan going forward is really important. Okay, thanks. So I have some questions now, and maybe you folks can help address those questions. I'm going to try and take the first one, though. Wait. There's more questions now. Okay, what are the minimum types of insurance you recommend? That just depends on your operation. And the best person to ask is your agent. And the second one, too, is there a percentage of revenue that should be spent on insurance, like 10%? Again, it just depends on your operation. The more exposure you have in your operation, the more you're probably going to pay for insurance. So take, for example, you have a dynamite manufacturing facility. Okay, so First Insurance is not going to insure it, but your property insurance is probably going to be really high because property insurance is based on construction, what the operation is, the protection, and your operation will be like through the roof. So it probably have to go not through standard lines, but to surplus lines like Lloyd's of London. Same with your work comp. I mean, like you mentioned the cut with the X-Acto knife, and that was probably your biggest exposure. Where I would argue if you send your employees off driving, probably that's the biggest exposure. But anyway, so maybe in like an office type setting, you'd pay a lot less for your workers' comp insurance than, let's say, what Ned was going through, where they're working with machines. Construction is a really high rate, so it just depends on your operation.
So do you know how they at least construct the research facilities for explosives? It's sort of like a Hawaii school, even though
I've been to Fracture Mutual.
Oh, okay,
Coast,
you see, yeah.
Okay, right.
So they don't usually have a central hall. It's all the doors open outwards.
Right.
If one of the labs goes,
Just in case, right?
It just blows themselves out,
Yeah,
not the one across the hall too.
Yeah. Bad stuff can still happen, though. Okay. Can you give specific examples about how a company should go about doing a risk management process? Specific examples. Okay, so for workers' comp, I would say if you have a hazardous operation that you do a job hazard analysis, which is breaking down the hazardous tasks that you do into specific into parts and making sure each part is done safely. So, for example, what do you do if you have a flat tire on the road? Called AAA, right? But if there was no AAA, how would you go about changing the flat tire? Well, first, you'd have to pull off to a safe part, pull off the road to a safe place, right? That's the first thing. Second thing, you probably want to be on level ground because you don't want to jack the car up when it's not on level ground. Make sure it's in gear in park with the parking brake on. So it's just a series of things on that side. You can do a job hazard analysis and go through that to do a risk assessment about a workers' compensation.
I would just call my husband.
And he would have to do the same thing. See, that would be me. No, and also, a lot of people don't think about it, but for example, I used to have a towing company. I used to have a small business. We used to run AAA a lot, but there'd be people like on H1 freeway stopping along a blind spot because they have a flat tire and they don't want to damage the rim, And then so we would call another truck before the blind spot, and it just got like sometimes so the thought process has to be there, and that simple thought process, just apply it to your business, apply it to your operation. But you're smart though, calling your husband. I don't know how he's smart. He's not. Just okay.
Could I add something
Sure.
Overall risk management for a company, not just in terms of insurance and accidents and things that worry us the most. But sometimes, the process I described with his charts and the waterfalls and all that works very well if it's hardware, if it's something tangible, if it's something that you have to make decisions early. There's a whole nother school of thought for startup businesses that are doing software, for example, and they have what's called Agile and a Scrum process. They say we don't even know the requirements of the software.
You don't know what you don't know, right?
Right. We don't know what we don't know when we start out, and they keep circling back and iterating on the requirements and iterating on the design. That doesn't work as well if you're cutting metal. Although some days I think Lori and I still do that. Okay, toss that part of the trash.
What's the worst that could happen?
Right. Try again.
Okay. Are there risk audits, like someone to evaluate your risks? I think that's kind of a general question, but to break it down, yes, there are. One of them is getting a good insurance agent or insurance broker to take a look at the entire thing, entire operations, and make sure everything is in place. On the risk management side, having good counsel, getting what you pay for kind of thing, having good people behind you and professionals. There's also, from the insurance company, there's people that can go out and assess the operations and, help you out in that regard too. So there's all kinds of things you can do on the risk management side. Anything to add? I saw you thinking.
No. Not to be cynical,
Sorry.
but I think if you're getting some kind of audit or some kind of professional expertise, having an attorney or a professional that can add their opinion to it or give you an assessment is very helpful. Not to say that all of them are like that, but to me, the world of insurance agents, they will tend to be on the very conservative side. So depending on what business you're in, it's just to question and answer, like, do I really need that? I mean,
Okay,
you know what I mean?
Yeah. Okay.
Well, I'd say, at least in my world, an insurance audit is a relatively routine sort of thing. They'll stop by once a year, once every 18 months, and just check out the operation. Okay, what changed? How many people do you have these days? All that good stuff. So I don't think that's necessarily anything to fear. They'll come back and say, you should consider these other lines of coverage, and one of them I think was cyber or something. So and some of them I'll
Don't
say,
worry about cyber.
no, that's not that. But I mean, some of the things I'll say yes to, and some I'll say nah. I don't want to spend that much money, but at least I.
But you're going through that
right,
assessment in your mind, right?
Right, the thought process
Right.
that goes into it.
Okay.
I certainly appreciate the feedback, even if I'm not ready to sign on the dotted line for everything yet.
What are the minimum types of insurance you recommend?
Looking at us, you're
Okay.
you're the agent.
Well, I'm not an agent, but it depends on what your operations are. I mean, there's no one size fits all. I mean, you need workers' comp insurance if you have employees by law. You probably should have property insurance.
You got it.
Right.
You got to. I mean, if someone
right.
stops by to visit and falls, I mean, you got to.
Liability insurance, the property liability insurance. I mean, those are the basics, and then out of that liability insurance, so there's all kinds of things that endorsements you can get. So that's a tough question to answer. It depends on your operations as well. So, but if you have individual questions later on, I mean, I'll be happy to answer them. If you have specific questions about your operation.
A lot of that one obviously depends on whether you have employees or not. But I mean, there are some basics, even if it's just one person sitting in an office. You don't want to be liable if someone trips them at the front door. So.
Right, and if you are, you want insurance to cover it as well. So, okay. I work out of my home. What do I need to think about? Does my home insurance cover my business? Okay, so generally, no. Okay, so most homeowners policies will have a commercial operation exclusion. I say most. You need to kind of take a look at getting commercial insurance for your operations. Okay, when you started out, this is for you guys, did you do a risk assessment?
No.
But I see that your pants, right?
No. In fact, I wish I knew you when I started my business. I was really lucky when you start out a business. I was working out of my mom's house. I was, I had minimal loans. I was in a very low risk type of situation. And I mean, I guess the biggest risk I had was when I started to grow was whether I rent or I purchase a business building. So there's that kind of financial assessment that I had to do and kind of understanding what my growth was going to be for the next 5 years, if I was going to be able to carry a mortgage or a lease. But as far as like really the only risk was me not being too lazy to get clients or not being confident enough with the work that I did. So I guess in that sense, it's a personal risk assessment as far as qualifying what I had in myself to build my business.
So I was going to lease an office from the start, so I didn't have to do that particular trade-off. But there were some insurances and such that were required of me in order to lease a commercial space. As soon as I had employees, there were insurances that were required of me to have employees. So those were just sort of givens, and it was dependent on payroll and headcount and the property that we went into and all that. I'd say overall risk assessment and the business and the first projects we did, in order to maybe perhaps I'm trying to think of the right words to say, allay some of the fears of my employees coming into a business at ground zero, sort of almost first day. Luckily, I had a business partner who was willing to offer them a guarantee, a backstop for a year from his already existing larger business that had been around 20 years or so. So I think that was a very nice risk mitigating factor to the people that I hired. I didn't ask for such a thing for myself. I wasn't worried about it. I was going to make it work somehow, right? I mean, that's a part of being the small business person.
Right?
But being able to offer that to my employees, if you're willing to take this crazy chance with this brand new business and come with me, you've got this guarantee for the first year. I think that was a very important risk mitigating factor for them.
I think another risk mitigating factor, I guess, when hiring someone is in the design field, what I started to do was freelance employees initially, just before I actually hired them full time. With the freelance experience, you're paying them by the hour, and you're getting to know who they are as a person, as an employee, what their work ethic is, and their skill set. Because when you interview someone, everything may look good on paper, and that initial interview may be really, really positive. But once you get them in the office, you kind of start to learn about that person as an employee. So actually, for me, hiring freelance for the first 6 months is a really nice test for them and for myself to see if they're like the right fit before I actually commit to full-time employment.
I'll say I think that's a very good point, Say, and it's a lot easier to hire someone than to fire someone, and obviously I've done my share of both over many years. But if you can get the right person in the first place, that can go a long way to reducing risk.
Good points. Okay, so what kind of protocol and rules should companies put in place for employees who drive? So, for a lot of small businesses, I would start with reviewing traffic abstracts, MVRs, and making sure you have the disqualification criteria to go by. So a lot of times what we see is past experiences lead to what happens in the future. So that's really important. Not only having safe drivers, but at least you did your diligence in taking a look at their driving records before you let them drive for your company. There's this concept called negligent entrustment. So if you didn't do what a reasonable person should have done, and a lot of times that's held to at least check their driving records for what they did in the past. And then coming in, if you have disqualification criteria, I mean, that's real critical, so you don't discriminate against anybody, just being consistent about it. I think that's the most important thing. You know, as the companies get bigger, there are other things, but that's the first thing to start off with, I think. I have heard there is a business interruption insurance. What is it and how does it work? It's complicated. It works if, okay, so how it works is, let's say, I'm going to give you an example. Let's say you have that restaurant and there's a fire. Okay, so you shut down your restaurant and you sustain financial loss because you're not having income coming into your business. And that's where the insurance will come in. Very basically, that in a nutshell, that's what it is. You're not going to get your total revenue, but they're going to ask you for what are your expenses, and then you know what your profit is, and they're going to provide you with that money, if you have the proper coverage, though. I don't know if anybody ever saw that business interruption form, but it's very long, lengthy, but it is important to fill out if that's what you need. And off of there's all kinds of other coverages on the business interruption side. There's like things like key man or key person coverage, where you might not be able to, you might not be operating, but you need your key manager there. So it'll cover the key manager's salary so that, you know, that person can stay on. And when you do open your business, you know, hopefully there's some continuity there. So, okay. Can you give any specific examples about how a company should go about doing a risk assessment? Is that me too?
We answered something
Similar to that, yeah.
Similar to
Right.
that a moment ago.
Yeah.
I don't know, what can I add to that? You know, there are books out there on risk management, and I guess as I alluded to, just sort of thought of it at the end of the last question, maybe after what Say said, there are different techniques for different types of businesses as well. Mm-hmm. So, you know, I would say if you're trying to do the next Twitter or Facebook, don't necessarily, you know, break out the waterfall charts and stoplights, right? And all that. So yeah, it depends on the type of business.
I think we're out of time, so but thank you very much. Appreciate it.